Our next guest is no stranger to the Axios stage. Meredith Kopit Levien is the president and CEO of the New York Times. Meredith, welcome.
Hi. Not sure I have enough sunscreen on.
I know, right? For this whole week, we're going to have some beautiful weather.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay, awesome venue. Laura, well done. Awesome venue.
And a round of applause for Laura Carenti, by the way, who's making all of this possible. Meredith, I know we are tight on time, so we're just going to hop right in it. Folks might be wondering, why is the New York Times here at the Women's Sports House? And the answer is the New York Times is very invested in women's sports coverage. In 2022, the Times acquired The Athletic, a subscription sports site. Woo to The Athletic, yes. And in 2022, last year, your chief commercial officer for The Athletic, Seb Tomich, told me that y'all were going to double your investment in women's sports, doubling the number of articles that were written about women's sports. It's been a year, Meredith. Have you met that goal?
The short answer is yes. And let me just say, I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be talking about sports. So happy to be talking about women's sports in particular. So we acquired The Athletic in 2022. It was probably 6.5 years old then. It was already doing some women's sports coverage, which I can talk about. But we said we should be doing a lot more of it, and we are doing a lot more of it. And I would say we're just beginning. So we had something in the neighborhood of 1,000 stories and blog posts and sort of larger than headlines things in 2022. We had almost twice that last year, which is great. The audience is gangbusters. So in every dimension of women's sport, the audience is significantly bigger now. The size of how do you get more coverage? You hire more journalists. We, I think, had 4 full-time, and I want to talk about it's many more people actually covering women's sports, but we had 4 full-time dedicated reporters. When we said we were going to more than double it, now we have 10.
Wow.
And the most important thing to say is The Athletic is a newsroom of just over 500 people. That's just the newsroom. So that, by the way, is a huge journalism operation. And we can actually apply much of that journalism operation to whatever is happening in sport, including women's sports, when the situation calls for it. So, for example, when, for the women's NCAA tournament, when it was so clear that there was so much interest in it, we dialed up and had 8 people, not all dedicated to covering women's basketball, but 8 people go in and actually cover the NCAA tournament. This is my favorite factoid. The Colts beat reporter was redeployed to cover the Fever.
Amazing.
So you get it. A huge newsroom that we can deploy on anything interesting happening in sports. And I would say women's sports, particularly women's soccer and basketball, hugely interesting. And those aren't the only things.
And what about products? Are you investing in new products around women's sports, or is it just doubling the amount of coverage itself?
I would say everywhere, everywhere we can meet fan interest and we can add dimension to the fan experience, we are doing that. And that includes in women's sports. And I always want people to know, what is it that The Athletic does uniquely? We are part of the sports community. Our journalists are sort of up in the business of the teams and the leagues and the tournaments that they're covering, and they are so up in the business that they're able to add sort of a level of dimension to what it means to be a fan. They're really adding to the fan experience, and we can do that everywhere. In women's sports in particular, we've just relaunched a podcast called Full Time with Meg Linehan. Who knows who Meg Linehan is?
Yes,
I know
Meg.
your next speaker knows who she is. Meg, I think, was the first full-time women's soccer reporter in the country, sort of deployed as such. And by the way, The Athletic has been at this for a long time. We've just relaunched her podcast full time. She and her co-host, Tamara Griffin, who's a storied journalist, did work for ESPN and USA Today, a number of other places. They're basically covering the NWSL, U.S. women's soccer, and kind of everything around it. They just did, I actually fell asleep last night listening to their episode. I fell asleep because I was tired, not because the episode wasn't great, but they just had, the much-awaited Emma Hayes talking about everything we're all so interested in as we head into Paris. So Full-Time just relaunched its weekly podcast. It's also a weekly newsletter. And I'll just tell you, this is how interested people are in women's sports, and specifically in women's soccer. It's got a 60% open rate.
Oh my gosh.
That is really high.
Wow.
So much, much more to come.
And then thinking about that audience, how does that audience index compare to the New York Times? Is it skewing more female? Is it skewing younger? What does it look like?
Oh, it's a great question. So the Times has 50 to 100, and when I say the Times now inclusive of The Athletic, just on your average week, has 50 to 100 million people coming to us every week in very big news weeks, very big sports weeks, moments where it seems like the whole world is playing a new game that we've launched. That number can go way up. And I would say The Athletic is now an important contributor on audience for the Times. When we acquired it, I have a chart that I look at literally every week. The sort of sports audience generally, when we acquired The Athletic, it was at the bottom of the chart. It was a paid subscription site with about 1 million subscribers, and not more than 1 million people really knew it was there or available or what it was. And so we have been steadily working our way up the chart. I think we just passed Bleacher Report. We intend to get all the way to the top of that chart, and we intend to do it for all sport, including women's sports. And obviously, interest in women's sports is just completely up and to the right. We see that particularly for soccer and basketball, and we can talk more about that, but we also see it for hockey and golf and tennis, and we are adding coverage in all of those areas.
That's incredible. And then let me just ask you to that end, in focusing more on women's sports, when you acquired The Athletic, that's now your sports play, right? So is most of that coverage going to come from The Athletic or folks at the New York Times that are covering sports?
Yeah. So, again, Athletic has a newsroom of more than 500 people working in journalism, so more than 500 people doing coverage, and that is a giant. We probably have the largest beat reporting force in sports in America, certainly one of the largest in the world. It is a huge operation. When we acquired it, the Times had a sports desk that was about 40 people. It covered sort of sports for the general interest, as you would imagine the preeminent news organization, global news organization is doing. And for the most part now, The Athletic is sports on the Times. So it is, if you go to our app, what you may get one or two sort of how does sports tie up in geopolitics or some other kind of general interest. You may still get that from a Times reporter, but most of what you're getting in sports is now from The Athletic, and we are super excited about that. That's in the app, that's in the paper, it's basically everywhere else we are. We're also, by the way, The Athletic, it's funny, the Times is not on Apple News Plus. Apple News is a pretty big news service, but The Athletic is in part of our push to say we want to be, a complete household name for every sports fan to start with in the English-speaking world and ultimately beyond that.
Well, since you brought it up, The Wirecutter is also on Apple News Plus, right?
Yeah.
Why then isn't the New York Times on Apple News Plus?
Raise your hand if you don't know what the New York Times is. Right. So, we felt very strongly that that with The Athletic and with Wirecutter, which is our shopping recommendations, product reviews site and engine, both had an opportunity to really scale the audience and really have many, many more people know what it was. For sports to be a big part of the way we make the Times essential to a consumer every single day. We just need lots and lots and lots of people to know that we're doing sports. So that's the reason The Athletic and Wirecutter are there.
Awareness, super interesting. And then a question for you. We reported a few weeks ago that Athletic editorial staffers were mulling a unionized effort. If they were that staff to vote to unionize, would the Times voluntarily recognize it?
Oh my gosh, such a specific question. I would say the Times works with lots of unions. I think we have 10 or 11 of them now, and we certainly recognize all of our colleagues' rights if they, if the athletic team chooses to form a union to represent themselves. They have a right to do that, but I don't have anything to report there. I'd say more importantly, or as importantly, what the Times wants to be and do is the best place on earth for any journalist to come do their work, and best place on earth because you have the time and the space and the resources to do that journalism, whether you're covering women's soccer or the WNBA or, the war in Ukraine, or anything else. We give you the time and the space and the editing and the expertise and all the support you need to do that best work.
And that's in large part because of investments. And when I think about The Athletic, there's been so much investing in that product. As such, it's not yet
you don't get to 500 journalists without investment.
No, that is
and
a
still
lot
growing.
of journalists.
Yeah.
Are you all the largest sports journalism site in the country?
I don't know if we can say that, but I do think, and this is not a scientific answer, we have a huge number of people covering teams, mostly in the United States, also in the UK, and to a lesser degree, but some around the world. And I think our beat reporting force is up there. It may be the largest. It is certainly one of the largest. And in terms of newsrooms, it's one of the largest newsrooms there is.
In terms of those investments, when you acquired The Athletic, it was not profitable. It's still not profitable, but you have told investors that you anticipate it will be, I think, 2025. Do you still estimate that it's going to get there then?
I mean, my short answer is we are super happy with everything about The Athletic. It's doing at least as well as we expected it to do economically. Turns out people really like sports and they really like being sports fans. And, sports journalism is adding dimension and sort of character building. It's adding like all the stuff that makes the fan experience that much better. You understand the players better. You understand the dynamics better. In women's sports, we're at the women's sports house, so I'll say, it's been under the radar for so long. You see people like talking passionately about the NWSL, and you see people talking passionately about the WNBA. You see people talking passionately about their NFL team, but I don't know that they're like wearing an NFL hat. You know what I mean? So I would just say The Athletic, we've invested to be able to add dimension to that fan experience. It's really working. We've said every quarter to Wall Street, we're doing at least as well as we expected to do economically. Turns out it's a really great ad platform. There's so much marketer interest in sports generally, in women's sports in particular. So we are really, really happy with how it's going. And to be clear, not stopping at break even. The idea is for The Athletic to do in sports what the Times is able to do in news journalism, which is to be, if not the preeminent institution doing what we do in a way that sets a standard for how to do it in every part of it.
But do you think it'll be profitable by 2025?
I've said we put out a profit target, and we have said we've done at least as well as our expectations so far. So you can read that. I can't update guidance here, but
Yes.
it's going very well.
Good.
And we're pleased with the economic trajectory.
And then in terms of the economic trajectory of The Athletic's impact on the Times and its bundled subscription, can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So basically, we want The Athletic to do three things for the broader New York Times. One, if you're already a subscriber to the whole of the New York Times, which is news, which is a news in and of itself is a giant thing, and recipes and shopping advice and games, and now sports journalism, we give you another everyday reason to use your subscription to the New York Times. So if you buy the New York Times bundle, the whole of the Times, The Athletic gives you, if you're a sports fan, just gives you so much more sports journalism than was there before. That's one. Two, we fully expect, and this is absolutely happening, The Athletic to bring new people to the New York Times. So there are plenty of people in the world who are very, very interested in sports who may not yet be a subscriber. It's hard to imagine, but they may not yet be a subscriber to the New York Times. And The Athletic really helps us bring people sort of into the funnel, bring people, prospective subscribers to the New York Times, and we're incredibly excited about that. And then three, I would say having The Athletic is yet another way that the broader New York Times can be relevant to you, and that high-quality journalism can be relevant to you kind of in every day in some way, no matter what's going on in the world. And I would say that is all really working. And to go back to your economic question, the economics are working so far because that is all really working.
And then talk to me about the integration of The Athletic into the Times, because you still report them as a separate segment, but now if you go to athletic.com, it reroutes you to nytimes.com.
I had this amazing experience where my 13-year-old son came home from school one day and he was like, "Mom, they unblocked The Athletic at school today. We could always read the Times, but they unblocked The Athletic. Did you call the principal?" And I was like, "No, we actually migrated the domain." So basically, this is boring to you all, but The Athletic was, built on a different tech platform, and it was a startup, and Times a very sophisticated tech platform. We have 10 plus million subscribers and many tens of millions of users. So we brought The Athletic onto the Times domain, and what that really does is allow us to enable what I just described. It allows us to bring you into the Times ecosystem and figure out in sports, use our awesome targeting technology on the Times, figure out what are you going to be most interested in as a sports fan. And it allows, if you're an advertiser with us, Times has incredibly sophisticated, we have a giant subscription base and a even more giant registered logged in user base. So we can target ads very, very well. We couldn't do that on The Athletic until they were on the same domain. And now we can do, for a marketer broadly, we're on a path to being able to do everything the Times can do.
And more, right? What would be the opportunity for things like ticketing, merchandise? Are you thinking about
so
those
much
things?
more? I would just say what we have found. I was thrilled when we acquired The Athletic. I am even more optimistic today that this is going to be, to use the sort of technical economic term, accretive to the New York Times. It's going to help the New York Times as a business grow. It's going to help the New York Times as a brand grow. And it's because everything we can do as a business for the New York Times, or even for Wordle or Connections or Strands or anything that we do, we can do on The Athletic. We can sell advertising, we can sell subscriptions, we can create unbelievable, interactive experiences that bring people deeper and more richly into a topic than we would otherwise do.
But are there business lines that are unique to sports that you could do for The Athletic that you couldn't do for
absolutely.
the Times?
Ticketing is a great example. We've got a partnership now where you can buy tickets. I would say anything that is enhancing to the experience of being a fan. Can we help you be a more intelligent fan? Can we help you understand the dynamics at play, even in the business of sports? If it is happening, you should imagine it's something we're contemplating doing on The Athletic.
Incredible. And then let's zoom out real fast, because I know we are tight on time, just to talk about the Times and the Times goals. So obviously, The Athletic is part of a broader play at bringing more subscribers to the Times. You all have said that you expect now to have 15 million subscribers by 2027, so you bumped up that goal. Do you think there is room for another big acquisition of a subscription company to help boost and get you to those goals? Or you think you're going to get there with the existing entities you have, which would be Core News, Games, Cooking, The Athletic?
Do you have something in mind?
I mean, should we create something right here?
Let me back up and say what the Times is trying to do is to be the essential subscription for everyone in the world who is curious and who wants to understand and engage more deeply with the world. And we have 3 ways we're trying to do that all together. 1, we want to be the world's best news destination and the place you come to engage in the broad definition of news journalism. First, most, best. 2, we want to have market-leading products in the spaces where people spend a lot of their kind of lifestyle and passion, energy. Games and sports are the 2 biggest of those by far, huge opportunities, but also recipes and shopping advice. And 3, as I described to you, we are working very hard to put that all together into a seamless kind of interconnected experience so you can play Connections and you can listen to Full Time from Meg Linehan and you can listen to the, women's sports, the women's basketball podcast that we're getting ready to launch. And you can read about what's happening 2.5, 3 years into the war in Ukraine, all in the same experience. That's what we're trying to do. We regard 15 million subscribers by 2027 as just the next milestone. We do not think that's an end state. By the way, we think journalism broadly, high quality, independent journalism broadly in the world we are headed into is even more necessary, and we have really big ambitions for it, and frankly, really big ambitions for the whole industry in journalism.
Meredith, I have so many more questions for you about the business of news, but you and I are going to be speaking on another stage on Wednesday talking about
We
that
are.
at Sport Beach, so definitely come check that out.
Can I tease that?
Yeah.
Find a platform. If you are a marketer, and there's got to be some marketers here, we are in Cannes, show me a platform that actually engages people with more trust and more deeply, and in a way that touches their souls more than high-quality independent journalism broadly defined. I don't know what it is.
Touches your soul. Deep.
And matters to you and the world.
Definitely. And I guess the last question would be, the Times is invested in The Athletic, in Wirecutter, in sort of lifestyle services like cooking and games. A lot of your competitors are trying to do that. The Washington Post being a good example. They invested heavily in wellness coverage, but they have not been able to have the subscription success that you have. What advice would you give to other news outlets, I'm thinking about the Post in particular, about how you build on those daily consumer habits with lifestyle services in a way that actually works?
Yeah, let me say I'm so proud of what we're doing at the Times. I think there is so much great journalism out there, and the best thing that can happen to the Times is a really vibrant market for high-quality independent journalism coming from a number of places. That's what's going to make more consumers open up their wallets and pay for sports journalism, for news journalism, for games, and so forth. So I do want to say that. If I were to look at the Times history and tell you what's the most important reason we got to where we are today, it's that we have been focused for almost a decade now on a handful of very, very simple ideas that seemed radical at the time when we started, but have taken all this time to play out and are really working. One is the first dollar in the place. This goes for news, sports, everything we do goes to the journalism. And we are going to come hell or high water, good days and bad days, we are going to keep investing in that journalism. The second is we have fought really, really hard to be destinations. We want to be something that you seek out, that you ask for by name, that you build a relationship with, that you make room for in your life. We don't want to be intermediated. We want you to come directly to us because you know why? We don't make money if you don't, for the most part, or we make less money than if you come and engage directly with us on our destinations. And three, and highly related, we want to be in a direct relationship with, today we're in a direct relationship with many tens of millions of people. We want to be in a direct relationship with many, many, many more tens of millions of people. And we have been at those three ideas. The first dollar to the journalism like for the whole of our existence, the other two for almost a decade. And I think I would just say it's a really long game. We're trying to make products so good that people are going to seek them out and find them and ask for them by name. However, the information ecosystem evolves from here.
The long game, that should be the title of a book about the New York Times under Meredith's almost 10-year leadership. Before we let you go, some of the big key takeaways. The Times is launching a women's basketball podcast soon, so make sure to look out for that wherever you get your podcasts. You just relaunched Full Time with Meg Lanahan.
And you should listen. Podcast. It's so good.
1,000 stories roughly about women's sports in 2022.
Almost twice as many.
Almost twice as many to almost 2,000 in 2023. It's not just basketball and soccer. It's also golf and tennis and hockey, other areas of interest for sports. 60% open rate on that weekly women's soccer newsletter.
Go Meg Lanahan.
Go Meg Lanahan. That is absolutely incredible. We talked about The Athletic and whether or not you would voluntarily recognize a union effort from them. And you said you've recognized other union efforts at the Times. And then last but not least, all of the opportunity for The Athletic. Things like ticketing, new revenue streams, integrating the product into the Times means you have better opportunities for brands and advertisers, all part of the New York Times long game. Meredith Levien, thank you so much for joining us
So happy
today.
to be here. And I just want to say I'm so impressed with what these guys are doing. I think high-quality journalism is up and to the right. It may not look perfectly linear, but I think it is up and to the right. And I think women's sports is up and to the right. So.
Thank you, Meredith. We appreciate it.